Chris, first of all, fascinating. The Wall Street Journal editorial page, once again, mocking people who are concerned about Donald Trump, saying that he's going to round up political prisoners, that he's going to round up his political opponents, that he's going to use the Army, he's going to use the National Guard to arrest, quote, enemies within, that a general, a four-star general who was, of course, Donald Trump's longest-serving chief of staff, saying that Donald Trump is a fascist, Donald Trump's last chairman of the Joint Chiefs said Donald Trump was a fascist to the core, and somehow the Wall Street Journal editorial page mocking Democrats and playing the Fuhrer card. How fascinating that they would say that. Who's playing the card? Earlier this week, they talked about the fascist meme, despite the fact, again, days after Donald Trump is saying that he's going to use the military and the National Guard to go after enemies from within. And he listed the former Democratic Speaker of the House and the future Democratic Senator from California. It's absolutely fascinating. They're writing this while Donald Trump's calling America a garbage can. He's called America a stupid country, while Donald Trump and other Republicans are trashing four-star generals that don't support Donald Trump. Chris, you and I have been at this for a very long time. It's, I've got to say, it's hard to be shocked, but not surprised after all these years. But I've got to say, I really am. I really am at how numb they have grown to even the most outrageous remarks of Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's so clear, Joe, that, and Mika, that this election has come down to the clear talking points of both candidates, though. Certainly, the Democratic Party and people concerned about Trump are worried about his horrific statements. And, of course, Trump is talking about immigration. Immigration will become a garbage dump. There are people coming in this country at will. You know, it's amazing to do what I spent yesterday, which is going through my old neighborhood right on the edge with Bucks County, right in Philadelphia, near the edge with Bucks County. That's sort of the dividing line politically. Our neighborhood is, every other house is Republican or Democrat. I walked around with the ward leader, Jim Donnelly, and the state senator, Jim Dillon, and you could tell how alternate houses are very much different in their views. I mean, there's certainly no doubt that race plays a role in this campaign. I mean, people don't say it. It's there. It's part of our history, going back to the 15th Amendment, going back to the 19th Amendment, with women being able to vote. It's there. The people in those houses that I grew up with, where I used to serve the bulletin to, the newspaper, are facing and being history. History is what they're going to make in this election, not just the news. They talk about what we talk about on the air. They're very aware of what's going on. They're talking about the issues about immigration, about the fascist charge against Trump. It's all there, but also history. Women being able to vote since 1920 with suffrage, are they going to vote separately than men? Apparently so. The gap is fantastic, the gender gap between men and women. Young men will vote very differently than older men. So even in the same neighborhoods, with kids coming home and me coming home to my old house where I grew up in, it's amazing to become having our close-up in history at the edge of Bucks County in Philadelphia, deciding history. And it's going to decide history because all of history in Pennsylvania is very easy to figure out. Hillary blew it, fairly or not. She didn't go to Erie, didn't go to Wilkes-Barre. This weekend, you'll love this, Mika, Christine Baranski is up campaigning in Wilkes-Barre this last weekend, her old Polish neighborhood. And it's so important for people to go back to their old neighborhoods. I really say, movie stars, don't put out press releases in Hollywood. Go to your old neighborhood where you grew up and talk to the people about what it was like growing up, and then tell them your politics. It's very important to communicate it properly, and I don't think the Philadelphia people are going to blow it, because the city organization of the Democratic ward leaders, all 67 of them, are all working and pounding their feet for this election. You've got the labor unions are in there all heavily, very big for the Democrats. And you've got a lot of college kids around the country coming in there helping out all over the state. Different places. They're kind of keeping it secret, I know. But the fact is they're really working hard, all the levels. So the Democrats will not be surprised in this election like they were in 16. This is an election where they're going to have to win it. They're going to have to see the enemy coming, knowing their neighbors are among their enemies in the sense of politics, and they got to work really hard to win this thing.
Just politics, and after this is over, Both sides are going to have to figure out a way to come back together. That's going to be extraordinarily difficult. Molly, I'm curious. Chris kept bringing up 2016, and there's no doubt that people that are working on the Harris campaign right now still haunted by the specter of 2016. But as Chris said, Kamala Harris taking nothing for granted, not taking Pennsylvania for granted, not taking Erie for granted, not taking Michigan for granted, not taking Wisconsin for granted. The question is, will it make a difference?
Well, that's the big question. But, you know, I was in Wilmington and I was talking to them, and they are, you know, everyone is always like, in the Hillary campaign, in the Harris campaign, they want you to think that they're losing. Right? They have taken a totally different tact. They really want everyone to be worried. They want everyone to be out there. And I think that's a lesson they've gotten from 2016, right?
And by the way, for people that are like laughing right now, that might say, oh, come on, they're just whistling. You know, they know how much trouble they're in. I will tell you, every time I ran campaigns, the thing that drove me crazy, and the few times that people saw me like show my temper, was when people started walking around saying, hey, I hear we're 3 points ahead. I would turn around and go, we are losing by 10 points. Now get out and knock in precinct 47 because we're going to lose this race.
And everyone you talk to in that campaign says, it's going to be tight. We'd rather be us than them. That's what they always say. And, you know, she's going, like, even the fact that she's going to Pittsburgh instead of Philly, right? These are choices. And she is going to go to Philly, too, and she has. But, like, these are choices. And I think they've done a lot of really smart stuff. They've got Bill Clinton out there in the South. They've got Obama out there. They've got Michelle out there. I mean, there really is just a sort of very thoughtful campaign, spending a ton of money. They have $1 billion. Look, we don't know what's going to happen, but it will not be because there was some huge blind spot they missed.
Meanwhile, I mean, certainly also the Harris team has an advantage when it comes to the field operations and ground game. If this is indeed a turnout election, just simply actually getting people to the polls that, you know, 2 Tuesdays from now, that might be an advantage to Harris, who has a far better organization even than the Trump people know. And that's the one area the Trump folks have gotten very confident, but they will acknowledge that's their weakness, is that those field operations. So, Doug, talk to us, though. One thing that Trump is trying to do is just create spectacles, you know, with his comments overnight talking about America as a garbage can, the stunt last week at McDonald's. He's going on Joe Rogan today, and he's even having a rally at Madison Square Garden on Sunday. Of course, Deep Blue City, where he got like 5% of the vote in 2020. But he wants the images of the crowd, and he knows the media won't be able to resist.
Absolutely. Well, there, you know, for Donald Trump right now, every moment he just wants his name talked about. He'll say the craziest, most bizarre thing just to gaslight the nation, but have the conversation being about Trump. You know, I'm surprised he's had the stamina this far. He often seems exhausted and tired to me, but he seems to keep going over there. It's helped him that he had the MAGA gear, you know, already in place, like kind of sticking to the old playbook. Musk brought on the dark MAGA. Probably Musk is has been Trump's most effective surrogate. But this is down to the wire, and I just don't think that we've seen an election that people's nerves are like this right now, because for a lot of people, Trump equals the end of democracy as we know it.
Now there'll be people who will say that's hyperbolic. The Wall Street, the Wall Street Journal editorial page knows exactly what Donald Trump is doing, and yet they're trying to make it about somebody else. They're trying to make it about, oh, people on the left are hysterical. No. Liz Cheney's not on the left. Yeah. Liz Cheney's more conservative than a lot of people that write on that editorial page. And Liz Cheney will be the first to tell you that a democracy, American democracy, the constitutional republic will change dramatically, will change radically if Donald Trump is elected president of the United States. You have generals who served this country who are saying the same thing. You have a lot of people that served with Donald Trump. A lot of people, again, it's hilarious. I guess they think they can cow people into not saying it, or maybe give a permission structure for people that read their pages to vote for a guy who's promising to be a fascist, who's promising to use the military against his political opponents. Maybe that's what they're trying to do. But let's not let them do that. Please tell me, have you ever heard of another presidential candidate at this stage of the campaign talking about using the military to arrest their political opponents and then continually pushing back also on a Murdoch-owned outlet to reporters and to talk show hosts who keep saying, well, you don't really mean that they're enemies of the state. You're not really going to use the Justice Department to arrest Nancy Pelosi, to arrest the next senator from California. You're not. And he goes, yes, that's exactly what I'm going to do. So please tell me if that's not a definition, or if that does not round out the definition of fascism, what does? Where do we get? When do we get to the tipping point for these people?
Well, that's, and you know, it's an American-style fascism. Trump's supporters think it's a kind of a joke. I'll be a dictator day one. Well, it's not a joke. Nixon kept his enemies list. If Nixon could have stayed in there, he was starting to destroy reporters through the IRS and the like. In this case, Trump, if inaugurated, will probably find 10 or so major American figures to try to destroy. General Mark Milley, Dr. Fauci, the list is going to grow long, to send a broadband message that I am above the law, because the Supreme Court gave that immunity clause. It's a back to Nixon, to David Frost on BBC. If the president does it, it must be legal. Trump believes that in his soul. It comes right from Roger Stone's tattoo, transfers over to him, that line of Nixon. And, you know, he has targets. Trump, Pelosi, top political one. He got under his skin too much. And, well, this is no way to run a country, that we're talking about a new president coming in. We've already experienced January 6th, and now Trump's saying, I'll get inaugurated, and I'm going to send like secret police or after these people, or destroy the Justice Department, or take our institutions, whether it's Environmental Protection Agency or Department of Education, and gut it. And it's, we're looking at a bit of a strong arm. We've had these figures in American history, the Huey Longs and Joe McCarthy, Strom Thurmond's,
right.
But not as president, and not one that already oversaw an insurrection.
But Republicans now don't care about January the 6th. They say it's much ado about nothing. You know, after the riots, after the attempted insurrection, and by the way, even people running Donald Trump's campaign after the insurrection called it an insurrection. But now, much ado about nothing. So what's going to happen if they arrest Nancy Pelosi, throw her in jail? How many Republicans are going to go, yeah, that's fine, because she said bad things about Donald Trump? What if he shuts down CBS News? And they'll go, yeah, they always were. But do we have any confidence that the people that have heard these threats are going to really give a damn when he starts rounding up people who have said tough things about him?